Alrighty. Perfecto. All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nהיה b'dbaro.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen, amen.
L'chaim, l'chaim, everybody. A good tavach, Shavua Tov. Wonderful new week, good week. As we continue celebrating 3 days of Purim. In Jerusalem, it's over now. And it's still going on here because it's still the day after Shushan Purim. So, auspicious time, 3 days, starting was Thursday night, Friday, Purim, going into Shabbos, and now Sunday. It's called Purim Mishulash, 3 parts to the holiday. So we'll try to tie that in. But we begin with the weekly Torah portion, as we do every week. Vayakel. And he gathered. Moshe gathered the Jewish people. That's how the Parsha begins. And let's look straight into the verses of the Parsha so we can get an appreciation, understanding. All right, there we go. You can let in everybody. That's it. Esther wants in. Okay. Oops. How do you like that? The wrong. How did that happen? Okay, folks, you're going to have to give me a moment. Somehow, I got last week's. No. All right. In my technically challenged moment, I thought I had, but undoubtedly not. Okay, guess what? I'm not really technically challenged. I just realized that the PowerPoint wasn't sent. So I was looking at last week's PowerPoint. My apologies. We'll manage without it. So, the beginning of the Parsha. If you have a Chumash and you want to look inside of your own Chumash, we're in the book of Exodus, second book, Shmois, chapter 35, verse 1, beginning of the Parsha. V'yakal Moshe. Moshe, he gathered the whole community of the children of Israel to assemble. And he said to them, these are the things that God commanded to make. 6 days work shall be done, but on the 7th day you shall have sanctity, a day of complete rest to God. Whoever performs work on this day shall be put to death. You shall not kindle a fire in any of your dwelling places on the Sabbath day. And Moshe spoke to the entire community of the children of Israel. This is the word that God has commanded you to say. Take for yourselves an offering for God. Every generous-hearted person shall bring it, namely God's offering, gold, silver, and copper, and blue, purple, crimson wool, and linen, and goat hair, and so on and so forth. And this will be the Mishkan, the home for God. So, let us give some context what's going on over here. Ever since a few weeks ago, from the Torah portion from Truma, began God's conversation with Moses to build a tabernacle. In English, we translate it Mishkan in Hebrew, which is a home for God. A home for God. And it should be constructed from gold, silver, copper, 13 different types of gifts that the Jewish people gave in the desert in order to create a home for God. Now, what our portion begins with, although primarily speaking about the construction of the Mishkan, of this home, it begins with the, as we just read, the observance of Shabbos, of the Sabbath, right at the beginning. And Rashi, picking up on the fact that seemingly it's out of place, because the context of everything in, again, from Torah portion Truma, Tetzaveh, Kisisa, now by Kisisa and now by Yakel, the fourth Torah portion, and will be also the fifth one next week, Pikudi, the final one of the book of Shmos of Exodus, is about this home. And yet the Torah portion begins with the observance of Shabbos, of the Sabbath. So Rashi picks up on it, and who is the commentator that we're learning to understand the simple meaning of the text. What is the meaning of these words in the 5 books of Moses? So it says 6 days. He first mentioned to them the admonition of Shabbos before commanding them about the works of the Mishkan, saying in effect that the Mishkan does not override Shabbos. Okay. So Rashi explains, why does Shabbos command come before the command to the Jewish people about building the Mishkan, this home for God, right? This traveling home in the desert, which ultimately would become the permanent home that King David would build on Har HaBayis, on Temple Mount, the Holy Temple, the first Holy Temple, which actually was built by his son, King Solomon, that lasted 410 years, and then was destroyed by the Babylonians. And then 70 years later, it was rebuilt, the second temple that lasted 420 years. All right. So it's all prefaced with the observance of Shabbos to tell us that in the building of this home for God, it doesn't override the observance of Shabbos. In other words, Shabbos comes, the 7th day of the week comes, halt your building, right? Stop it. So that's what Rashi tells us. Now, if we have a superficial reading about this, we would think it's the juxtaposition of, because the law of the Sabbath comes before the law of building and constructing the Mishkan, so it comes first, and the building comes second because of the order. Right? That's what it would seem from the simple reading of Rashi. But the truth is, that itself is a question. Why is it a question? Because last week, we actually learned this law in the previous Torah portion. It said God spoke to Moses, and before this specific command was given also about the laws of building a home for God, the Mishkan. And that was stated first. And then you shall speak to the children of Israel and say, only keep my Shabbos, for it is a sign between me and you for all generations to know that I am God. Make you holy. Therefore, keep the Shabbos, the Sabbath, for it is a sacred thing for you. Those who desecrate it shall be put to death. For whoever performs work on it, that soul will be cut off from the midst of its people. So Rashi comments there in last week's Torah portion. It says, only keep my Shabbos, my Sabbath. You must still keep my Shabbos, though you'll be preoccupied in the rush of the work of the Mishkan. Nevertheless, Shabbos should not be set aside on its account. This is indicated by the fact that every time the Hebrew word ach or rak, which means but or only, when they appear, they serve as a function of limiting or excluding. So in our case, only excludes day of Shabbos from the instruction of the work of the Mishkan. So in last week's Torah portion, we already know this idea that you should not work on the Sabbath when it comes to the construction of the Mishkan. Why? Because it says the word ach, which is a limiting word, which means only or but, right? In other words, everything that I've commanded you till now, it's, as the old saying goes, when you say everything that you just, but when you say the word but, what does that mean? Like, yeah, I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry, but, so, but means like, I exclude everything I just said, right? So the word but means over here to exclude. In other words, excluding the Sabbath, you should not construct the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the home for God, right? And that doesn't override it. But why doesn't it override it? Not because it came first in order, because first in order came the building, but because it says one word, ach, so it changes everything. So what do we see from here? That the order of something does not necessarily tell us the importance. And if anything, when you think about it, as we mentioned, there's 5 Torah portions, starting with Truma 4 weeks ago, that started speaking about making the sanctuary for God. So the primary focus of the latter half of the book of Exodus is about the sanctuary, the home for God, the presence of God. That's the primary thing. And of course, that's going to be the first and main discussion. That makes sense. And then you want to give a detail. What's the detail? That on the Sabbath, you don't do it. Don't construct this home. But that's a minor detail in the overall presentation of creating this sanctuary, this home, this presence of God here in this world. So logic would tell us that it would be first the Mishkan command, and then the detail of the Sabbath. So therefore, we have a question in our Torah portion. Why is that order turned around? Right? And furthermore, in our Torah portion, Moses is gathering the people and giving over the command of God. In the previous Torah portions, it was about God commanding Moses. How did God command Moses? First the tabernacle, then the detail of the Sabbath. What does Moses do? He switches it around. He first gives the Sabbath detail, and only thereafter he gives the command for the tabernacle, for the Mishkan, for the home of God. Why would he switch it around? After all, he's a servant of God. He's only there to bring but the word of God, and here he switches it around? That doesn't make sense. Is that clear? want to make sure we're being very precise here in something, and yeah. Can I get a thumbs up that you got it? All right. All right. Good. Yeah. Okay. So the Rebbe has a rule in Rashi. Remember, our focus is to understand Rashi's simple understanding of the Torah portion or the verses that we're dealing with, right? Rashi's interpretation is basic, uncomplicated. If it's complicated while being valid, Rashi will not present it. That's not his approach. Furthermore, Rashi expects that we're going to be very careful with his wording, very precise, and from the precision in his words, we will understand any issue that we have. So we have an issue over here that Rashi it seems to suggest that the order of the verses in our parsha, or the order of the command, that first comes the Sabbath and then comes the building of the Mishkan, as Moses tells the people, is because it comes first, right? That's why we don't build on the Sabbath. But we see previously that when God gave the command, it didn't come first. It came from the fact that God said, but. So how are we to understand our Rashi, and why would Moses change the order of the way God commanded things? So this is a sicha from this week's Torah portion. The sicha. And again, we're going to be exacting in the words of Rashi. And I apologize that I don't know why. I don't know why, but okay. So the key is in the words of Rashi, says, Hikdim lahem azaras Shabbos. Those are the Hebrew words. Moses, he first mentioned the admonition of Shabbos. Why is Rashi adding here to them, meaning to the Jewish people? He's admonishing the people, right? Why admonishing them? Right? As if almost to suggest they did something wrong. But they do wrong. They're being told the command. So they didn't do anything wrong. Not yet, at least, right? So what does it mean? So again, the command that you're not allowed to work on the Sabbath to make the home for God, even though you might think it's God's home, what could be greater than that? And that should supersede Shabbos. But no, it doesn't. That was given last week, and we know that. So what is the point over here? The point is over here. What was this home representing of God? Anybody know? What it is a home for God. God's presence is there, and the Holy of Holies, ultimately, where the Ark of the Covenant, where the tablets are, Torah is, God's presence is there. But what more specifically does it represent for the Jewish people? Anybody? Livsha, you know.
Well, maybe like Sinai, he was up there, now he's down here
No,
to
that I
like
mean, true, but yes, but something specific, lahem, that's something very personal to the Jewish people. This is something,
serve him,
huh?
to serve him directly, to have a deer to kanam, to make a heaven.
Okay, good. Gotcha. Come on. This represents forgiveness for the Jewish people for sinning with the golden calf. Let's back up a moment. When was this command given? The day after Yom Kippur, as Rashi says in the beginning of the Torah portion. What happened Yom Kippur that year? Anybody remember? It's not that long ago. It's only 3,338 years ago. Come on. I don't remember what from yesterday, but today, 3,000 years ago, we have a lot, Jewish people, we have a memory. What happened then?
Moses brought the Torah down.
It was the third time that Moses was on Mount Sinai for 40 days. The first time was after all the Jewish people, Shavuos, right? The 6th of Sivan. We all heard, right? 2.5 million people at the foot of Mount Sinai heard the two commandments of God speaking to the people. Then Moses went up the mountain, came back with the two tablets. The Jews were sinning with the golden calf 40 days later, right? He smashed the tablets. That was last week's Torah portion, right? Smashed the tablets, went back up the mountain, tried to get forgiveness. It wasn't forthcoming yet. He wasn't going to destroy the Jewish people. That was already, but, forgiveness wasn't yet. Then he goes up, Rosh Chodesh Elul, the first day of Elul, 40 days, right? That's when we start preparing for the new year, the beginning of the month of Elul, and it culminates with Yom Kippur, 40 days later. He comes down, he has a second set of tablets, and on that day, it's Yom Kippur. That becomes the Day of Atonement because the Jews have atoned for the sin of the golden calf. And the following day is where we are talking about right now. We're in the following day. Moses gathers the people. By the way, that's how the Rebbe explains. How do we know that when Moses gathered the people, it was the day after Yom Kippur? Maybe it was on Yom Kippur itself. So the Rebbe explains is because on Yom Kippur, Moses came down the mountain with the second set of tablets. Who did not go and greet him? Of course they went to greet him. No doubt about it. They went to greet him. And what does he come? He says, you're atoned. You're atoned for your sin. And here is the second set of tablets to celebrate. And we're going to celebrate. It becomes a day of celebration, which Yom Kippur is a day of celebration. That's why we make a Shechianu on Yom Kippur, thanking God for bringing us to this day, because God is giving us a day that we can have forgiveness and atonement. It's a great day to celebrate. And we celebrate it. Those who come to Chabad, at least. Other places are just very, down. It's celebrated with joy and seriousness at the same time. That's what happened on Yom Kippur. Rashi knows that it's the day after Yom Kippur because Moshe gathered the people. He gathered now the people. The day before, he didn't have to gather them. They came on their own. Moses is coming down the mountain. This last time we blew it, right? We blew it the time before. We didn't think he was coming down the mountain. We thought he was finished. And now he's coming down the mountain. Everybody comes and wants to greet him, and especially he gives the good news, atonement. The next day, he doesn't mix the command on that day. That day, celebrate. Right. The next day, he comes, gathers the people, and he says, hey, I've got something to share with you. On high, I was given orders. First thing is, the Sabbath is the Sabbath. But the second thing is, you're going to build a home for God, and that's going to, in a palpable, physical way, exemplify your atonement. Whoa. The people are ecstatic from the day before already, right? They're ecstatic from the day before. We are achieving atonement. Wow. That is phenomenal. Now comes the next day, and Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses is adding something to the mix. Not only are you going to have atonement, but you're going to have something physically that will all the time be a representation of your forgiveness and atonement, the home for God. So and this is what you got to do. Here's 13 different things. He continues and says to give as a gift. You give from your gold, give your silver, whatever you want to give, as much as you want to give. Certain things you had to give half a shekel, and as we've learned we learned last week and beforehand, that they have to give an equal amount. But generally, for the building of the Mishkan, everybody give your heart's desire. So what do you think their heart's desire was? Well, we're going to give. Because not only do we have atonement, but this will be, exemplifying and making palpable our forgiveness from God. So they're so thrilled. And because they're so thrilled, all right, that's why they first have to be told, Sabbath is Sabbath. Make sure that you don't transgress the Sabbath by making this home, because of the excitement that you will have in wanting to fulfill God's commandment, that it's a perpetual sign of his love and devotion and forgiveness to the people. So before so Moshe changes the order, because he knows of the enthusiasm, the excitement. And by the way, do you know how enthusiastic and excited that they were? Anybody know? It was the first time and last time in Jewish history that a rabbi came and said, we need your money. We need you to give donation. And at one point he says, okay, enough, we have enough. Never happened afterwards. I never heard a rabbi say, okay, don't give any more. You gave already. We have too much. It's true. A true story, though. Dayam had enough. Why? Because they were so enthusiastic that first of all, that they can create a home for God, that we can create God's presence here on earth. That itself, God's presence was on earth at Mount Sinai. But it was temporary. It was temporary that after Sinai, God's presence wasn't there anymore, and the mountain isn't a holy mountain. And that's why afterwards they sinned. Why? They sinned with the golden calf, because it was such an awesome presence, but it didn't take the human condition into condition. It was just so heavenly. And they weren't yet heavenly enough, so they couldn't contain the experience. It was too great. Now God comes and says, I'm going to have you a partner in making my presence. That you're going to participate. How are you going to participate? You're going to give gifts. And those gifts will be then turned into making this home. So now it will be permanent. So first of all, the excitement in making that home for God. And that secondly, that this will be the palpable, clear indication of my forgiveness and my love towards you. So the Jews are so excited to give and to build. So therefore, Moshe has to preface and say, not that we're worried that you're going to disobey God and you're going to work on the Sabbath to make the home for God. Obviously not. That's a total contradiction. But when you're enthusiastic about something, when your heart and soul is in something of creating this home, creating this sanctuary for God, you can lose yourself. And then not know that there's parameters, that there is boundaries. And God says there is a boundary here. The Sabbath, you can't do it. Shabbos, you can't build it. Recognize, not because, again, I want to emphasize that, not because the Jewish people would, not listen to what God wants. The command was given already. Moses in giving over here is not giving over he's giving over to the people, to them, and that's why Rashi emphasizes the forewarning them, because what this means to them, that they are a partner with God to create a home for God. And in that partnership, the presence of God will be there in an eternal way, as it will from the Mishkan. It goes from there, it was 40 years in the desert. Then when they went into Israel, it was 369 years in Shiloh. And then it was, as mentioned earlier, 410 years in the first Holy Temple when it became into a permanent home. And then 420 years after the destruction of the first Holy Temple, which in between was the story of Purim in the 70 years in those in between years. So it will be, the eternal capital or the eternal presence of God. Why is Jerusalem the eternal capital? Because the eternal presence of the Almighty is there, showing the unique relationship with the Jewish people, and that we partner in creating that home for God here on earth, and that it shows about that eternal love and the forgiveness for the Jewish people who created the first home in creating the Mishkan. So therefore, he switches the order, because before he gives them the exciting news on what they can do is just exciting news, but know that you can't do this on the Sabbath, because they're going to be off and running once he tells them, as I mentioned, they gave the gifts so quickly. They gave the gifts so quickly that the leaders didn't even have what to give. And because they came at the end, they said, let the people give and we'll fill in the blanks. Well, there weren't really blanks to fill in. That's the enthusiasm that the Jews had. So that's why he switches the order from the way God presented it to him, because he had to speak to them. You have to speak to the people. You have to know who you're speaking to. And you have to be able to give them the message that they need to hear. And what's the message they need to hear? First is the boundaries that are necessary. And then, the enthusiasm, the excitement, the great in new. When you think about it, a new path that we can partner with God in creating His presence on earth. So before we continue, is that message clear? Is it clear in the Rashi now? Yeah? Thumbs up? All right. So what we have here is something interesting, like an interesting message, an important message to take out. In mystical, Kabbalistic, Hasidic jargon, there's a term called Ratzui Vishoiv. Ratzui means the desire to go out of yourself, to go up and up. And Shoiv is to return, to come to the sure-footedness of a material world. So the soul by its nature is like a flame. A flame wants to leave the wick. The only reason a flame stays on the wick is because the wick is holding it down. But the nature of the flame is upwards and onwards and beyond, to flicker out of itself. As you see the flickering, it looks like it's flickering out of itself. That's Ratzui, a desire to be beyond, no boundaries, no limitations. And the soul is limitless because it's a part of God. That's limitless. At the same time, there's another movement that's necessary. Shoiv, return. Return to earth, if you will, right? To the materiality of the world, right? To the boundaries and the limitations of the world. What does that mean? So it means we have two movements within us that are opposite to each other and want opposite things. One wants escape and one wants balance, groundedness. One wants to go just all the way up and one wants to bring it all the way down, right? One wants the spiritual high and the other one wants the grounded reality of boundaries. One is fill me with more and one is, put me aside. Which one is true? Which one is real? They're both necessary and real. And this is, by nature, some people are more spiritually minded. So they're more, they could be more flighty by nature. I don't mean in a negative way. I mean in a positive way. They just see the spirit in the goodness and the flame that's wow. They see the wow. And others are much more realists. I'm talking about in a good way because both could be negative, right? A spiritualist could be negative and a realist could also be negative, right? I'm talking about in a healthy, good way, both of them. So the realist, who sees every step of the way is a step that can, climbing up the mountain can be a slippery slope all the way back down that you could come down crashing. And therefore it takes every step carefully. While the other is, in their head, they're on top of the mountain. So what's better, bottom of the mountain, moving your way up, or top of the mountain, seeing the world from a whole different place? Ultimately, God wants both from us. By nature, we're more one than the other. What it means to serve God is to incorporate both in your life. If you're more one, then you need the other more. If you're more the other, then you need the other more. But ultimately, we need both. This is exactly what the Torah portion is telling us. The word Shabbos comes from the word shov, to return. Shabbos spells the word tashuv, to return. Shov is return, boundaries, limitation. And here, this aspect of Shabbos, we mean the limitation of returning to a grounded reality, that there's boundaries. No building God's home on the Sabbath. That's what that boundary is telling us. Ratzui, where is their soul? Where is the soul of the Jewish people at this time? Yom Kippur, the day before Moses comes down and says, you're atoned. Here are the second tablets that bring that identify it in the fact that they're second tablets that are now part of the Jewish people. And then comes the following day. Not only are you atoned, but now you can participate in God and creating God's home here on earth by giving the gifts and building the sanctuary for God, where his presence will be permanently with the Jewish people, and it will then be in a palpable manner God's presence that's saying, I forgive you for the golden calf. Could you imagine the ratzui? The word ratzui comes from ratz, to run. Imagine how they ran, their soul ran out of themselves to bring the gifts, to do what was necessary in such a way that there were no boundaries. They gave it all, whatever it was. In such an excitement. They gave it all, which is beautiful. Which is beautiful, but at the same time, it too needs boundaries. And everything in life. The end of Tanya, chapter 53, the 53rd chapter of Tanya, brings about this idea of we're like a yo-yo. We have to get ourselves to the top of the mountain with a desire to connect in a very profound, deep way that the soul is ready to expire in a connection and feeling that deep, profound connection. And then when we get there, don't stay there. Come back straight to the bottom of the mountain. The limitations and the boundaries of what that means in bringing that experience, that feeling, that sense, and then translate it into the physical reality of this world and the limitations of this world through a simple act of doing a mitzvah, the physical act of taking a coin and giving it to charity, the physical act of putting on your tefillin, right? A physical act. What is that in comparison to the experience of being on high? That if you remain there, you missed the whole point, because you didn't bring it down into the limitations and boundaries of this world, and to express it in such a manner, in a simple material act of taking a coin, giving to charity, in a simple act of taking leather straps and putting them on, simple act of lighting Shabbos candles, whatever that simple physical act of returning to the limitations and the boundaries of a material world, that's what it needs necessary to do. Now you're there, yo-yo, back up. Go back up, top of the mountain. Don't remain there. You remain there, what's going to happen? You're going to feel limited. You're going to feel stuck. You have to go back to the top of the mountain. How do we experience this? What does this mean? I've told the story before, a famous story of the Alter Rebbe when he first came. He's a teenager, right? The author of the Tanya, we just mentioned. When he came to the Mizitcher Magid to learn from him, so he was given the Mizitcher Magid's son, Avram the Malach. His son Avram learned with him. He was more an angel than he was human. He was more there. They were once learning so deeply, so profoundly, that their souls, they felt like that was it. Their soul was going to leave them. Now, I don't know what that means because I've never reached to such a thing. None of us will. We're not so holy. But on our level, we can, and I'll bring that up in a moment, that he went and took a bagel and put some butter on it, made a blessing and ate. He had to ground himself in the physical material world to express that lofty, soulful experience it's beyond, but I had to bring it down and to express it into something that is grounded in this world. Once you're grounded, back up. You're up there, back down. That's the paradox that we're talking about over here. And we have that. How do we have that? When you learn Torah, especially Chassidus, what that should be getting us, top of the mountain, that we feel, oh my gosh, hopefully you feel that every day when we learn Tanya, when we learn Torah studies, when we learn whatever it is, we're on top of the mountain. We see the world differently after learning Torah. All our pettiness is gone. All the pain that we had in our heart, difficulty, challenges we were dealing with, you're on top of the mountain. You know, you're feeling it. That's the way ideally it should be when we study. I can't say it always is for me, but more often than it is, because that's what Torah is. It's the flame, that flame of God that just ignites us, that gets us to that top of the mountain, and we see the world completely different. That's what a Fabringen is, right? But you don't stay there. You don't stay studying the whole time, right? Then you have to go and express it in your eating breakfast, eating dinner, going to work, material limitations, boundaries. There's, things that just, get you down. Well, because you were on top of the mountain. Now, when you bring it that inspiration and you bring it down to the bottom of the mountain, to the depths of the boundaries and limitations of the world that we experience, and we bring that light there, we bring and express God's presence there. That is the ultimate. But don't stay there. You have to come back to learn again. That's why we have to learn by day and by night, because you learn in the morning, then you had the rest of the day to go through, and oh my gosh, you could get stuck at the bottom of the mountain. Then you have to learn at night, get back on top of the mountain, right? And then learn it again, and then go into your world to bring it all into that world. That is the message of giving us, don't work on the Sabbath. You're so excited about creating the home for God. The soul is exuberant. That exuberance, don't lose it. Sometimes it needs to be grounded. It needs the shoiv, the return, to bring it and express it in the boundaries and limitations of the human condition. So a divine reality and a human condition. And that's ultimately what the Mishkan is, what the home for God is. That's what it really ultimately represents, is this presence of an infinite God in a finite place. In a finite place called the Mishkan or the Mikdash. L'chaim. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts?
Rabbi, it's fascinating when you say the finite place, the Mishkan, because even after the measurements, it still seems that there's an infinite amount of space that can be taken by something. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. All right, we're all good, folks? All right. Amazing. A good tavach, everybody. Have an amazing, good week. And we'll continue, of course, next week, but we'll also continue tomorrow morning. 7:05 for Chassidus and 8:40 for Chumash and Rashi, 9:30 for Tanya, around 10 o'clock for Rambam. And then you can get off the top of the mountain. Or I'll get off the top of the mountain then, at least. But yes, how blessed that is. All right. Thank you, everybody. TRC coming up.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.